You know Japan's outboards are famous for reliability, right? But what if I told you some were ticking time bombs? Engines so wild, even their makers pretended they never existed. These 12 forgotten Japanese outboards weren't just rare, they were risky. Back in the 1970s, when everyone else was bragging about horsepower, Tanaka quietly said, "What if we made one small enough to fit in your trunk and your budget?" Their portable outboards, sold as Tanaka, TAS, or even Aquabug, were the little underdogs of the boating world. You didn't roar away with one of these, you politely hummed. Owners still laugh about how you could lift one with a single hand and still wave goodbye to the guy wrestling his 9.9 horsepower Johnson. And while Tanakas didn't always start on the first pull, they usually made up for it with loyalty. One fisherman joked his Tanaka ran better than his marriage because it didn't complain about weekends on the lake. They were smoky, simple, and stubbornly lovable. EPA emissions killed them off by the 2000s, but for those who had one, these tiny two-strokes were more than engines. They were proof that size really isn't everything. If you thought that engine was strange, wait till you see what's next. Hit subscribe now, because the next one makes even seasoned collectors shake their heads. Now here's a forgotten gem that smelled more like a tractor than a tender. In 1979, Yamaha decided to experiment with diesel power, birthing the MD5Y, a 5-horsepower, single-cylinder brute that sounded like it belonged on a fishing trawler, not a dinghy. You didn't so much start it as negotiate with it. Fishermen loved the torque, but hated the arm workout. Pull-starting one of these was like trying to start a lawnmower that hated you personally. When it did roar to life, though, it chugged steadily through the day, sipping fuel like a monk with tea. Diesel leaks and sheer weight made it unpopular outside Japan, but in tiny coastal towns, you can still find old men swearing it's the best thing Yamaha ever built. The MD5Y didn't last because the world wanted quiet and clean, but if reliability were a religion, this little diesel would have been its prophet. Ah yes, the Suzuki DT50, a two-stroke classic that looked bulletproof, sounded angry, and smoked like a chimney at Christmas. When Suzuki launched it in the early 80s, they bragged about smooth acceleration and Japanese precision. Owners soon discovered it was more like a caffeinated teenager, fast, loud, and constantly hungry for attention. The DT50's reputation came from its character. It vibrated like it had opinions, idled like it was plotting something, and left a blue haze behind that could repel mosquitoes for miles. But when it ran right, it flew. Those 50 horses were eager, snappy, and made light boats feel like rockets. Sadly, the EPA didn't find character very charming. The DT50's emissions sent it straight to extinction by the late 80s. Yet, ask anyone who owned one, they'll tell you it wasn't just an outboard. It was an attitude. A smoky, noisy, unforgettable one. The Tohatsu 55 was the kind of outboard that made you question your life choices halfway through the first pull. Built in the mid-70s, when reliability was more of a suggestion than a guarantee, the Sea Samurai was light, powerful, and wildly unpredictable. One day it purred like a kitten. The next, it tried to kick your arm off. Fishermen admired its speed when it worked. Its 3-cylinder, 2-stroke design delivered solid punch, but the carb setup had all the patience of a hungry toddler. Miss the choke timing, and you'd either flood it or stall it. Owners joked that it didn't need a kill switch. Frustration did the job just fine. Still, when tuned perfectly, it was glorious. It had that distinct, raspy Tohatsu roar that made small boats feel like speed demons. Sadly, its temperamental nature earned it early retirement. The Sea Samurai fought valiantly, But modern engines proved that not every warrior lives forever. The Yamaha P60 was supposed to be Yamaha's answer to Mercury's screaming racers, a lean, mean 60-horsepower two-stroke that could make even a small tin boat feel like a hydroplane. On paper, it looked perfect. Smooth lines, innovative carb tuning, and the same bulletproof reputation Yamaha would later become known for. But in reality, it was a bit too spicy for its own good. Owners quickly learned that Jetfish wasn't just a nickname, it was a warning. The P60's torque came on so violently that it could throw inexperienced drivers straight off the seat. Its throttle response was legendary, but so was its appetite for spark plugs and fuel. Some said it drank more than the fishermen who ran it. Still, when tuned just right, it was brilliant, like a temperamental racehorse that occasionally decided to behave. It's rare to find one today, mostly because many met early, smoky deaths in a cloud of burnt oil and adrenaline. But for those who remember, the P60 was pure 1970s madness, a time when Yamaha believed dangerous and fun were basically synonyms. The Suzuki DT85 was one of those engines that looked innocent, sleek silver cowling, tidy design, but underneath, it was chaos waiting to happen. Introduced in the late 70s, Suzuki built it to prove they could hang with Mercury and Yamaha in the mid-range horsepower race, and for a while they did, just with a bit more drama. The DT85 had a reputation for unpredictable personality shifts. Cold mornings, it'd start on the first pull. Warm afternoon? Forget it. You'd be pulling until your shoulder filed for divorce. Its ignition timing was finicky, and mechanics joked that the only reliable thing about it was the oil leak you'd always find after a run. Still, when it behaved, it was glorious. Smooth acceleration, clean lines, and a punchy exhaust note that made every small hull feel alive. But few engines have caused more love-hate relationships than the DT85. One old-timer once said, "It ran like a dream right before it decided to ruin your weekend." A true Suzuki classic, bold, ambitious, and slightly cursed. If you're still watching, you're clearly one of us. Someone who appreciates the weird and the wonderful. Stick around, because from here on, these Japanese outboards only get stranger, rarer, and far more unpredictable. The Tohatsu 60, affectionately, and sometimes sarcastically, nicknamed the Sea Dart, was Japan's attempt at making a mid-range outboard that could punch above its weight. And punch it did, sometimes right through the transom, if you weren't careful. Built tough and loud, it was one of those engines that always started, but never quietly. Owners said the Sea Dart was like an over-caffeinated mechanic. It did its job brilliantly, but made sure everyone heard about it. The throttle response was snappy, and on light hulls, it could throw a rooster tail big enough to soak the next marina slip. But longevity? That was hit or miss. Early models had crank seal issues that let water sneak into places water should never be, leading to the occasional smoke monster exit mid-lake. Still, the Sea Dart was a Tohatsu through and through, simple, fearless, and unapologetically raw. It wasn't refined like a Yamaha, but it didn't care. This was the kind of engine you could fix with a hammer and a sandwich, and that made it oddly lovable. Rugged, noisy, and short-tempered, like your favorite uncle who tells the same fishing story every weekend. The Nissan 70 was one of those engines that looked like it had something to prove. And maybe it did. Painted in a bold ocean blue finish, it was Nissan's attempt to challenge Yamaha's mid-range dominance in the late 70s. It had swagger, sure, but also a temper that could humble even the most patient boater. The blue Marlin was fast, responsive, and, when freshly tuned, felt smoother than any other outboard in its class, but it had one fatal flaw: cooling issues. Early production models had water pump designs that simply couldn't handle long runs in warm, salty water. More than one owner found out the hard way when their hot new motor quite literally became hot enough to fry a fish dinner. Despite its issues, the Nissan 70 had a loyal following. People loved its gutsy acceleration and signature growl. It was the kind of outboard that made you grin even while cursing it under your breath. One owner summed it up perfectly. When it ran like a dream. When it didn't, well, at least it looked good sitting dead in the water. The Yamaha P45 was supposed to be Japan's answer to Mercury's small horsepower kings, a tough little motor designed for fishermen who needed reliability above all else. What they got instead was a masterclass in overconfidence. The Sea Streak, as marketing proudly called it, was light, quick, and sharp until it wasn't. On calm mornings, it purred beautifully, slicing across glassy water like a samurai's blade. But when the waves kicked up, that same lightweight design became its biggest weakness. Cavitation was common, the mounts were too soft, and some unlucky owners even reported prop shafts snapping after a few rough launches. Yamaha quietly discontinued it before it did too much PR damage. Still, the Sea Streak left behind a kind of cult following. Mechanics loved its simple carb setup and easy access, while old fishermen swore that if you treated it right, it'd run forever. Others called it the gremlin in a tuxedo. Beautiful, charming, but ready to betray you the moment you let your guard down. The Suzuki DT85 was meant to be the brand's breakout mid-range marvel, sleek, silver, and marketed as Japan's new speed secret. On the brochure, it looked unstoppable. In reality, it was more of a beautiful headache. The Silver Streak, as boaters later nicknamed it, was a rocket when it ran right, but it had a mischievous streak that made owners question their life choices. Suzuki engineers were experimenting with aggressive port timing and lightweight castings, which gave the DT85 blistering acceleration, but also made it temperamental. If your carburetors weren't synced perfectly, it would either bog down or scream itself into oblivion. One fisherman joked, "It ran like it was possessed by a drag racer on bad coffee." The cooling system was another weak spot. Early versions struggled in salt water, leading to corrosion faster than anyone wanted to admit. Still, the DT85 had style, a chrome cowling, bold decals, and that signature Suzuki snarl. Today, it's a rare relic of Suzuki's trial and error years, half muscle, half mischief, and all heart. When it worked, it was glorious. When it didn't, it was character building. The Tohatsu M55 was the little outboard that wanted to fly, literally. Nicknamed the Sea Falcon, it was light, loud, and loved to scream at full throttle. At 55 horsepower, it sat neatly between small fishing motors and full-size racers, but it behaved like it had something to prove. The engine's two-stroke heart was strong, but the mounts and tiller arm were a bit too lively for their own good. More than one boater found themselves white-knuckled as the Falcon's torque kicked in, sending the boat veering like it had a mind of its own. "It didn't just plane, it tried to take off," one old owner joked. Despite its quirks, the M55 earned respect for its sheer personality. It was simple, easy to wrench on, and full of character. Even today, spotting one in working condition feels like seeing an old fighter jet taxi out of retirement. Still loud, still fast, still just a little bit terrifying. The Yamaha 50G, nicknamed the Shogun, was a mid-range outboard with big dreams and a bad temper. Yamaha built it to conquer the crowded 50-horsepower class, but the Shogun often fought its own battles. On paper, it was brilliant. Lightweight aluminum block, crisp throttle response, and clean carburation for its era. But in practice, it had a nasty vibration habit. At mid-range RPMs, it shook so much that fishermen joked it could tenderize bait before it hit the water. A few unlucky owners even watched mounting brackets crack after seasons of rough chop. Still, the Shogun had heart. It started every time, ran like a champ at full tilt, and looked sharp with its gunmetal gray cowl and red stripes. Most owners forgave its quirks because it just felt alive, loud, stubborn, and eager to prove itself. Like a samurai with a hangover, it might have wobbled a little, but it always showed up to fight. And that's the beauty of it. Not every Japanese outboard became a legend, but every failure taught a lesson. Some rusted away, others sparked revolutions. If you enjoyed this deep dive into forgotten machines, hit subscribe. The next one's even crazier.